Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on whatever podcast platform you listen to. On this episode, what I want to talk about is our tendency as leaders and as people in general to kind of misclassify where our opponents lie and who our opponents are when it comes to getting things done. I'm reminded of I saw a tweet that was from many years ago now. It was a quote from Fortune magazine. They interviewed the CEO of Boeing, and the guy said that the quote is, "We're going to beat Elon Musk to Mars." And it's this from this kind of like I'm on top of the world. There's like the moon. It's the space race all over again, right? But now 50 years later, and Elon Musk replied to the tweet with just the words "Do it," and it was this kind of like. When I see it, I always chuckle because what it shows is that Elon Musk doesn't care about who gets to Mars first. He just wants to be there. And so as a leader, when there's a problem to be solved, you may have a differing opinion from someone else on your team, whether it be people who report to you or your boss or your peers. Do you have a tendency to then view that person as your opponent? Or do you have the ability to look at the two of you together as being on the same team, and the opponent is the problem? And I love this because I think leaders who do this well, they have much better interpersonal relationships, and they remain focused on the problems at hand as opposed to their own ego. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I love it too. There's a quote that I have utilized myself, and I don't know where I got it from. I'm sure somebody told it to me, and I just kind of copy and pasted. But it's that the work doesn't care who gets the credit.
Yes,
and like that's really what it kind of comes down to. Is at the end of the day, like are we working towards a common goal? Or are we trying to absorb the credit for being the solution finder or the idea generator or whatever that might be? And I think that it slows, especially when you're leading teams of people. People are going to have good ideas. People are going to have their opinions. People are going to help to shape a strategy. People are going to be vocal in what they want to accomplish. And you want to be able to have people feel a sense of pride and ownership in being somebody who's involved in the process and maybe has helped to shape where we're going to go with something. But at the end of the day, it's not about that credit. It's about the work getting done itself. And I think that when I consider leaders and those that are kind of developing leadership skills and working through that, the quicker they can realize that it's not about them in the aspect of it. It has to be their idea, and that's the reason why it was successful. But it's about like, how did you pull successful ideas from your people and your teams? How did you create spaces where people could share their thoughts and their ideas, and then those things help to shape the strategy? You create a culture of kind of this empowerment element, and you remove yourself and the ego that you have. And sometimes as a leader, you actually know the right answer and you actually have the right idea. And you can approach it by saying, I figured this out. I know what to do. This is what we're going to do. Or you can take the time to think about what questions can you ask to get people there as well, and then validate their idea. Even if you had it first, it's very powerful in those spaces. So I like this idea of thinking about it as like it's about solving this thing, and it's not about who does it first, but it's about how do we get there the most efficient and effective way.
Right. Well, and the best way to do this right is to actually care about solving the problem first. Like if it's a problem that you care about solving, this becomes much easier to do. If it's not a problem you actually care about solving, then the purpose for solving it becomes the credit for solving it. If the purpose for solving it becomes that your job is easier, your life is easier, your ability to lead people is easier, all these things that benefit from you solving this problem, if that happens and you can tie those two together, it's much, much easier to kind of put that bag of bricks down of like, who gets the credit and kind of move forward with solving the problem. I will tell you that when I've known leaders who are not good at doing this, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You get the person who's always complaining that no one ever sees the good work they do, that they never get credit for doing anything, that their leaders or their other people on their team, that people are always taking credit for the work that they do. those people are likely putting a lot of effort into making sure they get the credit for things. And if they instead put that same effort into getting the work done and not as much effort into getting the credit for things, it's amazing how on a long enough timeline, they start getting the credit for things. It's when half your brain is focused on solving the problem and the other half is focused on how do I engineer making sure I get the credit for this. There's no way to solve a problem effectively and efficiently if only half of your brain is doing it. But if you are focused solely on the problem at hand and you don't care about the credit magically has a way of getting on the people who deserve it, not necessarily every day or every hour or on a quantifiable one-to-one basis, but in aggregate. And so what I want to ask you is, how do you make sure that you instill this in the people that report to you who may have a hard time with this? How do you make sure that if a person is focusing more on getting the credit for something, and you want to assume positive intent and assume that it's not because they are trying to take the credit where it's not due, but it's because they genuinely feel like the train's going to leave the station without them, and that no one will ever know the hard work they put into something unless they take steps to make it happen. How do you kind of ensure a person like that to kind of trust the process and let go of that a little bit and focus on the problem? But first, I want to give it up to a word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, as a leader of people, if you have somebody who you see this kind of happening, where they're focusing on the credit as opposed to the problem, how do you genuinely get them to take a step back and think through things differently if it seems that they are just kind of fixated on this?
I think, like in most cases, it's just telling them that exactly. Hey, Chris, I know you've worked really hard on this, and I know that this is something that you've owned, and I appreciate the work that you've done, and I want you to know that I see you and I credit you for all of this work, right? Like I see it, I credit you for it. I see what's going on. I also wanted to go back to when we talk about leadership and your responsibility as a leader and how I really want to see you show up for people. Like, I want you to take credit for when their ideas and when their hard work is helping to move our system and helping to move our culture and helping to move our people in the right direction. So I think like these are one of those situations where you just have to call it out and you just have to state it for what it is. And then you have to have more dialogue around like why it is important from time to time that you are getting credit for the work that you do, but how you go about informing people or how you go about that showing up in your space is a certain approach and style that you can have. And then also making sure that I'm really clear on how I validate the credit. Because again, as a leader of leaders, people are going to show up in whatever way that I show recognition or that I provide that level of credit.
Oh, so true.
So I can control that. I can influence that. And if I'm not taking the time to define that for them, or saying to you, Chris, hey, I know you really took this project on. You really led this. You pushed this and pulled this over the finish line, and I appreciate that. And so for this next, opportunity, this is what I want to see. I want to see you be the advocate. I want to see you in the stands cheering on your team, providing them with support, direction, perspective that helps them to take this project across the finish line. And here's how I'm going to take a look at that. And here's how I want us to be able to follow up to make sure that, number one, you feel valued and that you understand that there is just as much value in being the person running on the track as there is the person on the sideline that's handing out water, as there is the coaches over there, as there is the person that is sitting back and watching their team be successful. Like, there's a lot of credit to be given, but as you want to lead people, it's that ability to flex in those different spaces is what will be valuable in your career.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I think a lot of leaders respond to this really poorly. They'll have a person on their team that seems to be fixated on getting the credit for things, and they respond by not giving them the credit for anything, because it's almost like they want to try to like beat that out of them. Like, don't focus on trying to get the credit, or it's not going to work out for you. And what instead they should be doing is, if you have a person who's fixated on making sure they get the credit for things, give them the credit. You're not reinforcing the behavior. You're letting them realize that they don't have to work hard at getting the credit for something because you as their leader are doing it for them. That's what they're looking for. So give them what they're looking for, and they will stop focusing on getting the credit for things, and they'll put more focus and effort on solving the problem to begin with. And so it's kind of like this you catch more flies with honey than with fly paper, or the old fable of like the sun and the wind arguing over who can get the guy to take his coat off first. And the wind saying, of course, I can blow it off way faster. And the guy just holds on tighter and tighter and tighter, where the sun just shines a little brighter and the guy gets warm and takes his coat off. It's the exact same thing. If you're the leader, you need to shine a little brighter when a person is in the face of holding on tight to that coat, and make them want to take the coat off. Don't try to blow it off of them by not giving them what they are looking for. If you can do that for your people, you'll find they end up putting a lot more effort into solving the problems and less effort into trying to take the credit for things.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership, a Spreaker Prime podcast. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.